The massive chamber stretched high above like a crystal cathedral, its walls catching light from distant stars and throwing rainbow patterns across the curved ceiling. Ambassador Kim Dae-hyun straightened his dark blue diplomatic uniform as he walked to the human section, his footsteps echoing softly on the polished floor. Around him, creatures from across the galaxy were taking their places for what everyone expected to be a boring meeting about mining rights. His assistant, Cho Soo-young, was already seated with her data tablet, checking their notes one last time. She looked up as he sat down. "The Vorthak delegation seems restless today," she whispered in Korean, knowing their translators wouldn't pick up casual conversation. Dae-hyun glanced at the tall crystal beings across the chamber. Their bodies were made of what looked like living glass, and they chimed softly when they moved. Right now, their usual musical tones sounded slightly off-key, which meant they were worried about something. Probably just concerned about the mining. "Quotas," Dae-hyun replied quietly. "Their homeworld needs those rare metals for their young to grow properly." The chamber was filling up with an incredible variety of life forms. The Nexari looked like clouds of glowing gas contained in floating spheres. The Corvani had 4 arms each and skin like polished stone. The aquatic tidal delegates sat in mobile water tanks, their tentacles moving in patterns that meant different things in their language. Humanity had only been part of this council for 37 years, which was nothing compared to civilizations that had been exploring space for thousands of years. Most of the other species still saw humans as the new kids who were trying hard to fit in. They were polite about it, but Dae-hyun could sense the quiet condescension. Humans were useful for some things, but they weren't considered major players. In galactic politics, the opening ceremony began with each species offering a traditional greeting. When it was humanity's turn, Dae-hyun stood and spoke in the formal galactic language. "We come seeking wisdom and offering friendship. May our words build bridges between the stars." It was a phrase carefully crafted by Earth's diplomatic corps to sound appropriately humble and peaceful. The other delegates made approving sounds, though Dae-hyun suspected some of them found human customs a bit simple compared to their own elaborate rituals. As the real business began, Dae-hyun settled into his role as humanity's voice. He would listen carefully, speak respectfully, and try to secure fair mining rights for human colonies without stepping on anyone's toes. It was delicate work, but he was good at it. Earth's reputation in the Council was built on being reasonable, cooperative, and non-threatening. The session's moderator, a floating energy being called a luminary, began reading the agenda. Mining rights, trade route adjustments, and some minor territorial disputes. Nothing that should cause any real problems. Dae-hyun had no idea that within the next few hours, every species in the galaxy would completely change how they thought about humanity. He just wanted to get through another successful day of quiet diplomacy, building trust, one careful conversation at a time. The first speaker rose to address the assembly, and the session officially began. When the formal ceremony began, Kim Dae-hyun stood up slowly, making sure his movements were calm and respectful. He had practiced this moment dozens of times back on Earth, working with language experts and cultural advisors to get every detail right. "We come with open hands and listening hearts, seeking harmony among the stars," he said in the galactic standard language, his pronunciation perfect after years of study. The response was immediate and positive. The crystal Vorthak delegates made beautiful chiming sounds that meant approval. The water-dwelling tidal representatives created swirling patterns with their tentacles that looked like underwater dances. Even the gas cloud Nexari pulsed with brighter colors, which their translators said meant they were pleased. Cho Soo-young smiled slightly as she watched from her seat. Her boss was really good at this diplomatic stuff. Every word, every gesture, every pause was calculated to show respect without making humans look weak. It was like watching a master craftsman at work. The real meeting started with complaints about mining operations. The Nexari delegate floated forward, their gas form shimmering with concern. "The atmospheric processes on the gas giants are changing the chemical composition of our breeding grounds," they said, their voice sounding like wind through crystals. Dae-hyun nodded thoughtfully, taking a moment to choose his words carefully. "The wisdom of the Nexari brings important concerns that affect all life in our galaxy," he replied, using the formal phrases that showed he took their worries seriously. It was like a careful dance. Every species had their own way of speaking, their own cultural rules about how to show respect. Humans had spent decades learning these rules, memorizing the right responses, the proper gestures, the correct tone of voice for each situation. When the discussion turned to the actual mining rights, Daehyun saw his chance to help. The mining operations in sectors 7 through 12 affect many of our peoples, he said, standing up again. Perhaps we could work together, forming a committee where all species have a voice in the decisions. The suggestion rippled through the chamber like a stone dropped in still water. The four-armed Corvani delegate immediately gestured with all four hands, which meant strong agreement. The energy beings called ethereals, who usually stayed quiet during meetings, began pulsing with interest. This was what humans were known for in the galactic community. They weren't the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced, but they were really good at finding solutions that made everyone happy. While other species might argue about who was right or who deserved what, humans looked for ways to share and compromise. Soo-young watched the other delegates discussing Daehyun's suggestion with growing excitement. Several species were nodding or making their own versions of agreeing gestures. The luminary moderator even pulsed brighter, which meant they thought it was a good idea. Your people have a gift for bringing others together, the elderly Corvani delegate said directly to Daehyun, using the informal speech that meant they considered him a friend rather than just another diplomat. Daehyun bowed slightly in the human way, then added the Corvani gesture of touching his heart with both hands. We learn from the wisdom of all species, he replied. It was going to be another successful day of human diplomacy. The good mood in the chamber changed completely when Delegate Bayek of the Zephyrian Empire stood up. The Zephyrians were trouble, makers who had only joined the Council 15 years ago after the other species had to force them to stop attacking their neighbors. Bayek was huge, almost 3 meters tall, with thick scales covering his body and old battle scars that showed. He was a warrior. His 4 yellow eyes looked around the room like a predator sizing up prey. This talk about mining rights is boring, Bayek said, his voice so deep it made the floor vibrate. The Zephyrian Empire owned these star systems long before most of you. I even learned to fly between planets. Kim Daehyun kept his face calm, but he could feel the mood in the room getting tense. Other delegates were shifting in their seats, clearly uncomfortable. Honored Bayek, he said politely, perhaps we could look at the historical records you mentioned. The Council's files might help us understand. Records? Bayek made a clicking sound with his mouth that was like laughing, but mean. Strong people don't need papers to prove what they took with their own strength. We conquered those territories because we were powerful enough to take them. That's how the real world works. The entire chamber went quiet. Nobody talked about conquering territory anymore. That was old thinking from hundreds of years ago, before species learned to work together peacefully. Cho Soo-young felt her hands tighten on her tablet as she watched her boss's face stay perfectly calm, even though she knew he must be getting angry inside. With respect, Delegate Bayek, Daehyun said carefully, the Council follows the rules we all agreed to in the Harmony Accords. Claims based on old conquests aren't. Harmony, Bayek said, and actually spit on the floor. A bitter smell filled the air around him. That's just a word weak species use to feel better about themselves. The Zephyrian Empire understands that the galaxy respects strength, not fancy. Speeches. These newer species, especially humans, seem to think pretty words matter more than real power. Suddenly everyone was talking at once. The translators couldn't keep up with all the angry voices. The four-armed Corvani delegate was waving all his hands in distress signals. The crystal Vorthak became so upset, their bodies went dim and colorless. The gas cloud Nexari started spinning faster, which meant they were agitated. Daehyun raised one hand to ask for quiet, his voice staying steady even though delegates were shouting. The Council has always been stronger when we work together, Delegate Bayek. Maybe we could find a way for the Zephyrian Empire's different ideas to fit into our cooperative system. But Soo-young could see that her boss was different now. His shoulders were straighter, his breathing was more controlled. She had worked with him for 3 years and recognized the signs. Ambassador Kim Dae-hyun was getting very, very angry, but he was hiding it behind his diplomatic smile. The Zephyrian delegate didn't seem to notice the change. He was too busy enjoying the chaos he had created, his 4 eyes gleaming with satisfaction as he watched the other species argue among themselves. This was not going to end well. Beck's 4 yellow eyes locked onto Kim Dae-hyun like a hunter staring at prey. Collaboration? Cooperation? These are just words weak species use to trick strong ones into holding back their power. He pointed directly at the human section with one clawed finger. Your people talk about peace while you live on dozens of worlds that should belong to species strong enough to really defend them. The room felt colder suddenly. Everyone could sense that this conversation was heading somewhere dangerous. The energy beings called ethereals started pulsing with worried light patterns. The water-dwelling tidal delegates pulled their tentacles close to their bodies like they were getting ready to hide. Human colonies were all approved through proper council rules, Cho Soo-young said, trying to keep her voice steady. Every settlement went through the standard approval process and... Rules, Beck cut her off, his scales rippling in a way that meant he found this funny. Your people hide behind paperwork because you're too scared to take what you want by force. The Zephyrian Empire grew strong by taking what we could hold with our own strength. Your colonies only exist because stronger species let them exist. Dae-hyun's hands, which had been resting calmly on the table, slowly tightened into fists. His face still looked diplomatic and peaceful, but people who knew him well might have noticed his eyes getting harder, more focused. The Council's basic rules make sure that all member species, Dae-hyun started to say, are protected by species stronger than them. Beck finished the sentence for him. Your human colonies in the Kepler star systems are sitting in space that rightfully belongs to species who can actually defend it. The Zephyrian Empire could prove this point whenever we choose to. The chamber exploded with shocked voices. Nobody had made direct threats between council members in over 100 years. The old Corvani delegate was waving all 4 arms in panic signals so fast that his translator couldn't keep up with what he was trying to say. When Dae-hyun spoke again, his voice was much quieter than before. Delegate Bayek, are you threatening military attacks against council member colonies? I'm just telling you how things really work, Beck said, acting like the conversation was already finished. Strong species do whatever they want. Weak species put up with whatever happens to them. Your people should figure out which group you belong to. Soo-young watched her boss carefully. She had never seen him like this before. His breathing was different, deeper, and more controlled. His shoulders had changed position slightly, settling into a stance that reminded her of the self-defense classes all Earth diplomats had to take. Most importantly, something had changed in his eyes. The polite, friendly expression was still there, but underneath it was something much more dangerous. The Zephyrian delegate seemed completely unaware that anything had changed. He was enjoying the fear and anger he had caused, his 4 eyes gleaming with satisfaction as he watched the other species react to his threats. But Ambassador Kim Dae-hyun was no longer the same person who had walked into this chamber an hour. Admiral Park Ji-hoon stood alone in the communication room of Earth's largest warship, the Rising Sun. Outside the thick windows, hundreds of human ships floated in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming under the light of distant stars. Each ship was sending out signals that made alien detection systems go crazy with warning alerts. The message began broadcasting to every council world at the same time. I am Admiral Park Ji-hoon of the Earth Defense Force. 3 days ago, you killed our ambassador in your council chambers. You broke every rule about protecting diplomats that civilized people follow. You called us weak. Today, you will see what humans really are. Behind him, display screens showed weapon systems turning on across 12 different star systems. Energy readings that alien scientists couldn't understand lit up monitoring stations all over council space like Christmas trees. We sent you our best person, Park continued, his voice calm but cold as winter. Ambassador Kim Dae-hyun represented everything good about humanity. He came to you with hope, wanting to make friends and build peace. You murdered him for trying to be kind. The camera moved back to show how big the human fleet really was. Some ships were longer than entire cities. Their weapons could break. Day-apart moons. Their defensive shields could bend space itself like rubber. You have 3 days to do these things. Say you're sorry on every communication channel in the galaxy, pay us back for killing our diplomatic team, and make new rules that treat humanity as an equal partner, not as children to be pushed around. On Council worlds, emergency meetings started as the broadcast kept going. You think we're weak because we're young, that we're stupid because we hope for good things. But we come from a planet that tried to kill us with ice ages and giant rocks. From space, with diseases and wars that would have destroyed weaker species. We learned that peace only comes when you're strong enough to protect it, and sometimes you have to show that strength. The Admiral's face filled screens on 1,000 different worlds. 3 days. Think carefully about what you do next. Because the next message you get from humanity won't be a warning. The transmission ended, leaving Council worlds in chaos. Emergency sessions were called on every major planet. Military commanders stared at sensor readings that showed human ships appearing, in places they shouldn't be able to reach. Scientists looked at weapon signatures they couldn't identify or understand. In the depths of space, Admiral Park Ji-hoon watched the fleet around him. These ships had been hidden for decades, built in secret shipyards that alien intelligence had never found. The crews were volunteers who had trained their entire lives for a war they hoped would never come. But Ambassador Kim Dae-hyun was dead, killed while trying to make peace. The time for hoping was over. The Admiral turned to his communication officer. "Send the recall signal to all our hidden fleets. It's time to show the galaxy what happens when you threaten human families." The officer nodded grimly. "Yes, sir. All fleets responding. They'll be in position within 48 hours. War was coming to the stars. Something inside Kim Dae-hyun completely changed. The polite diplomat disappeared, replaced by something that made the delegates sitting near him lean away without even thinking about it. When he spoke, his voice was completely different from the careful, respectful tone he had used all day. "Let me make sure I understand what you just said, Delegate Bayek," Dae-hyun said, each word sharp and clear. "You just told everyone here that human civilians, including our children, are good targets for military attacks to make us afraid." "I just told you how war really works," Beck replied, but his voice didn't sound as confident as before. Something about the human had changed, and it was making him nervous. "How war really works." Dae-hyun nodded slowly, like he was thinking about those words carefully. "You know, for 37 years, humanity has been part of this council following what we call diplomatic rules. We've been very careful to respect your customs, to follow the old ways of talking between species." Cho Soo-young watched her boss with growing worry. This wasn't the ambassador she knew. This was someone completely different. Around the room, other delegates were starting to realize they were seeing something that had never happened before. "But I think," Dae-hyun continued, his voice becoming almost friendly, like he was chatting with an old friend, "there have been some big misunderstandings about what those rules mean to us. You see, Delegate Beck, when we're polite and courteous, that's not because we're weak. That's because we choose to be that way." He stood up slowly, and somehow, even though he was much shorter than Beck, he seemed to fill the entire room with his presence. "When you threaten human families, you're making a choice too. You're choosing to see what humans look like when we stop being nice." The Crystal Vorthak delegate had become completely see-through, which only happened when their species was face-to-face with something that could kill them. The gas cloud Nexari had squeezed itself into a tight ball like it was trying to hide. "You want to talk about strength, Delegate Beck? Let's talk about strength. But first, let me ask you something. When you were gathering information about human abilities, did you ever wonder why a species that learned to travel between stars in less than 100 years decided to solve problems by talking instead of fighting?" Beck's 4 yellow eyes were now staring only at Dae-hyun. All his earlier confidence was melting away like ice in the sun. The chamber was completely silent. Even the background humming of the life support systems seemed muted. Every delegate could feel that something fundamental had shifted. The human ambassador they thought they knew was gone, replaced by something that made their survival instincts scream warnings. Soo-young had stopped breathing. She had worked with Dae-hyun for years, but she had never seen anything like this. It was like watching a house cat suddenly reveal it was actually a tiger that had been pretending the whole time. and Delegate Bayek was beginning to realize he had made a very, very serious mistake. "The thing about humans, Delegate Bayek," Daehyun continued in that same friendly conversational voice, "is that we were never the animals that got eaten. Every other species in this council came from creatures that had to run away, hide, or blend in with their surroundings to stay alive. Humans? We hunted the biggest, most dangerous predators on our planet until they were all dead, and we did that before we even learned how to farm." He pointed at the holographic images that still showed peaceful human settlements. "These colonies you think are easy targets. Every single one is protected by defense stations in orbit that your spies never found. Each station has enough weapons to turn an entire continent into glass." The room was so quiet, you could hear people breathing. Cho Soo-young's hands moved quickly over her tablet, bringing up files that weren't supposed to exist. According to what alien intelligence agencies knew about human capabilities, you talked about how the Zephyrian Empire conquered 17 worlds. "Over 400 years, Daehyun said, walking slowly around the big meeting table. "That's pretty good. Humans have detailed plans for invading 43 council member worlds, and we update those plans every 6 months. We don't use them because we choose not to." Beck's scales were changing color, turning darker, which happened when his species got scared. "You're lying. The Council's spy networks would have found what? Our hiding technology that's based on how predators think, something your species never learned. How weapon systems that were designed by creatures who spent 100,000 years hunting things bigger and stronger than themselves." Daehyun touched his wrist device, and holographic star maps appeared in the air above the table. They showed trade routes, defense systems, and fleet positions all across Council space. Human traders have been secretly mapping every Council world's defenses for 30 years. "We know where your shipyards are, Delegate Beck. We know when your patrol ships go where. We know which of your colonies would starve if their food shipments stopped coming." The old Corvani delegate was waving all 4 arms frantically, making hand signals that meant they should stop the meeting immediately. Daehyun acted like he didn't see them at all. "But here's the real difference between humans and species like yours," he said, staring directly into Bayek's 4 eyes with an intensity that seemed to see right through him. "We don't want to conquer anybody. We don't want your planets, your resources, or to make you bow down to us. We just want to be left alone to grow our gardens and raise our children in peace. The fact that we could wipe out your entire civilization before your warships could even respond? That's just insurance." The word insurance hung in the air like a threat. Every delegate in the chamber suddenly understood that they had been completely wrong about humanity. The polite, helpful humans they thought they knew were actually apex predators who had been choosing to be nice. And now they weren't choosing to be nice anymore. Daehyun touched a small device on his wrist and spoke a few quick words in Korean. Within seconds, every screen in the council chamber started flashing red warning lights. Loud alarms began going off as ships that nobody had seen before suddenly appeared on all the sensor displays around the space station. "What you're looking at," Daehyun said calmly, "is the 3rd Human Defense Fleet becoming visible. They've been sitting around this station for the past 6 hours, completely hidden from all your sensors. The tactical screens showed dozens of sleek warships that had just appeared out of nowhere, their weapons already pointed at every non-human ship in the system. The ship designs were unlike anything in the Council's computer files. They looked sharp, dangerous, built for killing. Each of those ships," Daehyun continued, "carries enough weapons to break a moon in half. The biggest ones can burn every living thing off a planet's surface in less than an hour. They're operated by humans who volunteered to be soldiers, something we never told the Council about because we hoped we'd never need them." Delegate Bayek's 4 eyes were jumping back and forth between the displays, his warrior brain finally understanding that he was looking at something much more dangerous than himself. Around the room, other delegates sat in shocked silence while their own military experts tried frantically to figure out how an entire fleet had appeared without any warning. "The interesting thing about how humans fight wars," Daehyun said, sitting back down in his chair, "is that it follows one simple rule. Use overwhelming force with perfect accuracy. We don't fight fair. We don't give warnings. We find threats and destroy them completely before they can fight back. Cho So-young spoke for the first time since the demonstration began, her voice carrying the same deadly calm as her boss. The ships you're seeing right now represent about 8% of human military strength. The rest are somewhere else. This isn't a threat, Dae-hyun said, though the way he said it made it sound exactly like a threat. This is just showing you capabilities we've chosen not to use. Every council member world is being watched by human ships right now. Every major city, every military base, every factory. We've been watching, taking notes, and getting ready. Stood up again and walked over to where Beck sat frozen in his chair like a statue. You wanted to talk about strength, Delegate Beck. You wanted to explain how the galaxy really works. Let me explain it back to you. The human ambassador leaned down until his face was level with the Zephyrian warriors. The galaxy works peacefully because apex predators like humans choose to grow gardens instead of hunt prey. But don't make the mistake of thinking we forgot how to hunt. Every delegate in the chamber could feel the change in the air. The polite, diplomatic human they thought they knew was gone. In his place was something that their deepest survival instincts recognized as the most dangerous thing in the room, and it was staring directly at them. What happened next was completely different from any council meeting in recorded history. Delegate Beck, all his earlier confidence completely gone, tried to take back his threats. He claimed they had been just theoretical discussions and philosophical thoughts, not real plans. Nobody believed him. Kim Dae-hyun went back to his diplomatic voice, but now every delegate understood exactly what was hiding behind that polite tone. The Zephyrian Empire's concerns about territory are noted, he said formally. However, any future talk about military attacks against civilian populations will be met with immediate and equal response. The other council members quickly began trying to fix the diplomatic damage. The old Corvani delegate officially condemned Bayek's statements, while the Crystal Vorthak representative made harmonious chiming sounds that meant strong agreement. Even species that had always thought of humans as the junior members of the galactic community now spoke to them with new respect. Perhaps, suggested the Nexari delegate, their gas cloud form still squeezed tight with stress, we should postpone the mining rights discussion for today and meet again when everyone has had time to think about today's revelations. When the session officially ended, delegates left in quiet groups, their conversations hushed and urgent. Intelligence agencies across the galaxy would be working day and night, trying to understand how badly they had misjudged human capabilities. Beck stayed in his seat long after the chamber had emptied, staring at the tactical displays that still showed human warships positioned throughout the star system. His warrior instincts, developed over generations of predatory evolution, had finally recognized a superior hunter that had been hiding in plain sight all along. Dae-hyun collected his materials with the same careful precision he had used throughout his diplomatic career. As he got ready to leave, he stopped beside the Zephyrian delegate. For what it's worth, Delegate Bayek, he said quietly, humans really do prefer cooperation to conquest. We'd rather grow gardens than dig graves, but we'll always protect our gardeners. As the human delegation walked out, Cho So-young fell into step beside her boss. Sir, the council will never look at us the same way again. Dae-hyun nodded, his diplomatic smile returning, but now everyone would know exactly what it was hiding. Good. Maybe now they'll understand that being polite isn't the same as being weak. And maybe they'll think twice before threatening human families. The crystal towers of Station Harmony reflected the lights of the human fleet as it began to leave, going back to wherever it had come from. Behind them, they left a council that had learned a basic truth about their newest members. Humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology or their numbers. It was their choice to be civilized, and the terrifying possibilities of what would happen if they ever chose to be something else. The galaxy would never be quite the same again. And perhaps, thought many delegates as they returned to their home worlds, that was exactly what it needed.